The helicopter circled the crescent of black rock that jutted from the slate-colored Atlantic like a chipped tooth. From above, the inlet looked harmless. Just another sea cave scooped out of volcanic stone, its mouth scalloped and glittering with kelp. Only the tide, now shuffling away from shore, revealed the flat terrace of porous basalt where waves normally gnawed. Mira Corvallen pressed her forehead to the plexiglass door, fighting the old ache that always bloomed behind her ribs when she saw an uncharted coastline. A decade of marine fieldwork had taught her how to lace exhilaration to fear, how to braid them so tightly that nobody, not even her dive partners, could see the seam. Jonas Gayar, wedged beside her, thumbed through a laminated checklist. Depth, 22 meters. Predicted surge, minimal. He muttered. And a song? Mira asked. He looked up, eyes the same gray as the sea under them. Hydrophones registered sustained frequencies from 40 to 300 hertz. It's still singing. He tried for a grin and failed. The locals say the cave only breathes when the moon's in its waning quarter and the tide's retreating. That's tonight, she said. Lucky us. The headset crackled. Dr. Corvallen, where do you want me to set you down? The pilot asked. Platform looks stable. Give us 20 minutes to unload and you can return to the frigate, she answered. When the skids kissed the rock, Mira jumped out, knees flexing to absorb impact. A curtain of salty wind slapped her cheeks. Jonas followed, carrying sealed crates that clinked like bottled Starlight sensor packages. Spare mouthpieces, a drone sub no longer than his forearm. The helicopter peeled away, its rotors shredding the dusk, leaving sudden hush behind. Except it wasn't hush. Something hummed inside the cliff, as though stone held a tuning fork against its own ribs. A sea cave sings at low tide. Divers entering find echoes solidifying into crystal cages around their lungs. The line had first appeared in a letter addressed to her department unsigned, postmarked from Lisbon, written in flowing sepia ink as if the sender had dipped a quill in diluted rust. An old maritime superstition her colleagues assumed and tacked it to the faculty bulletin board like a joke. Mira peeled it down the same afternoon. She read it again every night, until the words felt like breath itself. Now the cave before her exhaled that syllableless tune in real time, an earthquake translated into melody. Bass notes quivered under her boots. Jonas crouched by their equipment, testing harness buckles. Matteo called it O Canto do Alveolo, the song of the alveolus, he said, jerking his chin toward the yawning entrance. Said it steals the lungs' memory of emptiness. Mira remembered the fisherman's lined face, his filigree of net marks across knuckles. During yesterday's visit, Matteo had poured them thick coffee and pointed at the horizon. His daughter Isadora had vanished in this cave last year, leaving only a cluster of translucent shards scattered on the shallow. He kept them in a pouch, took them out and rattled them like dice whenever he lost track of the conversation. You plan to bring her back? He'd ask Mira, voice rasping like rope through pulleys. No, she'd answered truthfully. I plan to listen. Matteo nodded, neither blessing nor curse, just sorrow shaped into motion. Now, twilight slipped across the water like ink dispersing in oil. Jonas finished inflating their lift bags. Re-rathers? He asked. She ran gloved fingers over the carbon fiber shell strapped to her spine. No bubbles, no acoustic interference. A necessary stealth for any experiment involving sound. Checked. And the resonant disruptor? She tapped the cylindrical case bolted beside her tank. Its prototype transducer could emit a sonic burst at selectable frequencies up to 50 kilohertz, academia's polite euphemism for a black budget device that might, with luck, shatter whatever crystalline threat lurked inside. Let's hope we don't need it, she said. Jonas twisted his mouth. Hope's never been a strategy. They stepped to the lip of the terrace, where the cave surrendered its throat to the night. The tide had ebbed far enough to expose a smooth corridor, only knee-deep in seawater. The song grew louder, yet remained oddly internal, vibrating behind the breastbone rather than in the ears. Mira's pulse synchronized, a double beat echoing in the spaces between each chord. She clipped a beacon to the rock and ducked under the overhang. Darkness engulfed them. Their helmet lamps cut narrow tunnels through salt haze. Barnacles glittered like constellations across the ceiling. The first audible echo burst against them when the entrance kinked left, funneling sound deeper. It resembled human singing, if the human voice had been fed through whale anatomy and reversed, like magnetic tape unwinding. A swarm of harmonics ricocheted down the shaft. Jonas's shoulders twitched. "It's hitting the upper mid-range," he said through comms, though she saw his lips move only lazily, as if molasses pulled at them. "You feel pressure behind sternum, yes. Same as when a submarine drops to the thermocline." They continued another 20 meters until water reached their chests. The passage opened into a domed chamber. Here, the acoustic energy thickened, nearly tactile. When Mira inhaled, air coursed in smooth, but exhaling felt as though her lungs expelled slurry, each breath dragging grit across tissue. She turned, startled, and caught glimmering motes cycling from Jonas's mask to the gloom. Each exhale birthed prismatic flecks no bigger than fish scales. They rotated, aligning with unseen magnetic poles, then drifted downward the moment they lost vibrational lift. The floor glistened with them, a beach of misplaced snowfall. "Crystallization begins at respiratory moisture interface," Jonas reported, slipping back into scientific detachment even as wonder widened his eyes. "Temperature inside cave is 6 degrees cooler than outside air. Supersaturated calcium carbonate likely precipitates along aerosolized droplets produced when we speak or breathe. Sound pressure may catalyze deposition." Mira reached out. A crystal landed on her glove. Hexagonal lattice, perfect as a lab-grown diamond. She touched it to her lips. Instantly it sublimated, leaving tang of copper. Jonas coughed. The cough echoed thrice, each repetition higher than the last. The third echo hung mid-air, then condensed into a lattice-work sphere no larger than a plum, and dropped, chiming when it hit his regulator. His eyes bulged. "Did you see?" "I'm seeing." She swept her lamp across the chamber. Stalactites sang with the cave, resonating so intensely the boundaries between voice and geology blurred. They were inside an instrument, Mira realized, a living cathedral whose choir was tectonic motion, whose congregation was anyone reckless enough to enter. The letter's promise came roaring back, echoes solidifying into crystal cages around their lungs. Was this how Isadora had died? Drowned not in water, but in the failure of breath to leave the body? The floor sloped into a dark pool that pulsed like a heart valve, inward on inhale, outward on exhale. Something in her marrow insisted the song's source nested below. "Jonas, any sign of tidal rebound?" He consulted his wrist gauge. "We've got 90 minutes before water creeps back to ceiling, tops. Then we dive now." He hesitated, but training overrode fear. They fit their mouthpieces and submerged. Water swallowed the song, yet didn't nullify it. Instead, it traveled through bone rather than air. An internal chorus humming inside teeth roots, kneecaps, figures of past divers, half-remembered from warning pamphlets, ghosted Mira's thoughts. Nitrogen narcosis, O2 toxicity, blackout. None matched this uncanny gentleness with which breath thickened, but did not disappear. Each inhalation remained effortless. Only exhalation found itself netted by infant crystals, slowing, stiffening. At 4 meters, Jonas released a puff to adjust buoyancy. Bubbles rose 2 hands' breadth, then froze, each spear cupped by a filigree of mineral before ascending again in stop-measured jerks. Light from their headlamps scattered across facets, painting both divers in kaleidoscope shimmer. They descended along the cavern wall, following a serpentine fissure. Mira's instruments recorded spikes at harmonic frequencies that shouldn't coexist. G-sharp 2 octaves below middle C, a fractured C minor triad, and something too low for A-weighted meters. She adjusted the gain, and her wristpad displayed a waveform so dense it looked like ocean floor covered in barnacles. At 15 meters, the passage widened into an underwater rotunda lit only by their beams. The song funneled here with brutal clarity. Each consonantless syllable vibrated the fascia between Mira's lungs and ribs. She felt like a cello being tuned. Jonas halted. His exhale emerged as a spiderweb of prismatic lace that clung to the inside of his full-face mask before draining away. He tapped his chest. 2 fingers splayed. Trouble? She saw the problem. The regulator diaphragm crystallized along its rim. Flow still moved, but slower. Resistance would climb fast. They should abort. But the Sorcerer was so close. Mira signaled surface? Jonas shook his head, pointed downward. He'd rather cut minutes from their margin than retreat empty-handed. She relented, though guilt scratched her throat. A scientist's greed, she chastised herself. She'd known its taste before, during coral bleaching surveys, when she returned for just one more measurement and nearly missed the evacuation helicopter. During volcanic vent sampling, when she lingered inside Plume Shadow to snag a rare archaea and melted the outer layer of her suit. Knowledge always demanded a toll. Tonight, the currency might be lungs. They dropped through an aperture that took them to 22 meters, the sonar map's maximum depth. The floor leveled into a trench lined with mere smooth silt. Here, the crystals were everywhere, drifting like snow inside a shaken sphere. She realized with horror that most were shaped exactly like bronchio trees. Tiny replicas of human airways, as if thousands of sighs had been cast and flaked apart, each glinted, carrying the memory of an exhale never complete. In the trench's center stood a stalagmitic column, pale and translucent. A low, thrumming A-flat seemed woven through it. As they approached, light revealed hollows within the column: lungs, trachea, larynx, skull. It wasn't coral. It was a person, flash frozen in shimmering carbonate, mouth open in silent plea. Isadora. Jonas aimed his lamp upward in automatic scientist curiosity. Her petrified hair spiraled like seagrass. One hand clutched a dive slate whose plastic frame had dissolved. Its graphite scribble splayed across the inner crystal surface like bruises. Mira's rebreather wheezed. The counterlung inside her suit crinkled. She felt emerging stiffness under her sternum, nervous blossoming of an internal cage. Jonas unhooked a sampling vial. She grabbed his wrist. He stared, stubborn. If they fled now, they might yet purge their airways before crystals set like cement. But he wanted proof to justify Isadora's death to the world, maybe to himself. She shook her head. His eyes turned from slate to steel. He yanked free. As he scraped the vial against the choir of floating specks, his regulator cough increased, became ragged. A thin lattice crept from the edges of his mask toward his cheeks, like frost colonizing glass. He swung around to show her, the regulator's throat and exhaust valves encased. He could still inhale through the supply line, but nothing left his chest unimpeded. Time for the disruptor. Mira unclipped the cylindrical device from her belt. She set frequency to 48 kilohertz beyond human hearing, but capable of rattling molecular bonds. She hoped the water would dampen collateral damage. She signed, Jonas. Brace. Then she pressed trigger. A silent rip tore through the trench, light-warped, an instant lensing of reality itself. Crystalline dust convulsed, disaggregating into slush that the current sucked toward fissures in the rock. The song faltered, flattened. In her chest, resonance stopped. Diaphragm loosened. She exhaled. Clean. Unimpeded. Relief stung like nettles. Jonah's mask cleared, but the stalagmitic statue fractured at every juncture. Voice box, knee, wrist, then shattered into gravel that drifted downward like obscene confetti. Isadora's final form, undone in seconds. Jonas stared as pieces tinkled to the floor, his fury radiating like heat through cold water. Mira's own grief bloomed. She had not met the girl, yet she felt the violation. but scientific morality had no column in equipment logs. Survival left no room for elegy. The song restarted, quieter, but rebuilding quickly. Echoes of their sonic blast bounced back, redoubling strength. They had minutes, maybe less, before crystal formation resumed. Mira signaled assent. This time Jonas didn't argue. They rose along the fissure, muted nodes of light sliding over recalcifying walls. At 10 meters, water shivered. Crystals nucleated again around their exhaust ports, though slower than before. The cave sought equilibrium, furious at interference. At 5 meters, Jonas froze. A hexagonal lattice pinched his scapular region. He flailed. Lift bag snagged. The more he struggled, the more shards proliferated, weaving into a corset anchored to rock outcrops. Panic took him. He hyperventilated, a death wish here. Each blast of air blossomed new growth. Mira grabbed his shoulders, forcing eye contact. She placed her palm on his chest, pressed until he matched her measured rhythm. Inhale 4, hold, exhale slow through pursed lips. She then unclipped her dive knife, sawed at lattice connections. Blades sang against mineral bars. Too slow. Alternate plan. She unclasped Jonas's secondary regulator, shoved it into his hand, and yanked his primary free. She motioned for silence. Breathe minimal. Exhale only when she said. Without constant airflow, crystal genesis would starve. He obeyed, eyes rimmed red. She then set her disruptor to a lower, more targeted frequency, something to weaken localized structure without invoking another shock wave that could collapse the passage. She pressed it against the junction where cage fused to rock and fired a 1-second pulse. The lattice splintered. She ripped him loose. Together they kicked upward, scraping knuckles on roof edges, now only an arm's breadth above water. The tide making its claim. They breached into the initial chamber, helmets striking air saturated with song. Here the resonance multiplied again, but at least breathing felt less treacherous. Jonas expelled a ragged cough, launching a handful of crystals that hit the cave wall with tinkling fanfare. Mira forced her own lungs empty, bending double, determined to leave nothing the cave could repossess. They half-waded, half-scrambled down the tunnel. Water lapped knees, then ankles. Overhead, dusk had deepened into star-lustered night. The song's timbre changed as open air diffused its force, no longer a command, merely an echo of an echo. Crystals under their boots crunched like thin ice. They reached the terrace. The helicopter was only rotor minutes away, but there was no way to summon it quickly. Protocol required half-hour windows. Instead, they activated an emergency flare. Red flame licked the wind, pouring sparks into the gloom like spilled rubies. Mira and Jonas stripped their helmets. The cool night slammed their faces. They fell to hands and knees, hacking. Each cough liberated charred slivers of themselves, perhaps forever embedded if they didn't purge them now. Blood threaded Mira's saliva. Jonas' shoulders shook. Not sobs, laughter, a cracked guttural thing. God-da-da. The sample, he wheezed, lifting the vial, miraculous and intact. She smacked it from his hand. It skittered across stone before plopping into the ocean. His expression crumpled. You think I came here for trophies? She snarled, voice raw. We were seconds from suffocating in our own bodies. That statue, Isadora, he choked. Already dead. You want her memory on a museum shelf? Let the cave keep its dead. They stared at the dark mouth. The song had softened to mere whisper-proof that distance, like silence carried its own mercy. Headlights crested the horizon. The frigate's launch was coming. They sat side by side, legs dangling over water. Salt crept into every cut. Sound made solid. Jonas murmured after a while, "We broke its grammar, and it tried to break our biology." He rubbed chest. "Did it feel beautiful to you, even while it hurt?" She considered. There'd been a moment right before the first cough when she felt perfectly tuned, each cell vibrating in harmonic sympathy with the planet's oldest note. It was like standing inside the lungs of the earth, borrowing its breath. Yes, she admitted. And that's what makes it lethal. Beauty that refuses to let you go. The launch arrived. Medics helped them aboard, taped oxygen cannulas to noses, drew blood. Calcium levels elevated, saturation borderline. They would live, but X-rays might show lattice ghosts in alveolar corners for years. Souvenirs they could never display. As the boat turned toward the frigate, Myra faced the cave one last time. Moonlight silvered its aperture. The song rode the wind toward her, thin but resolute. She thought about Matteo, waiting in his shack, listening for a footfall that would never return. Tonight he would feel the ocean shift, perhaps sense the abrupt silence where his daughter's crystalline monument had stood. She wished she could tell him nothing in that chamber had resembled life. Not really. Only a fossilized farewell. She pulled the letter from her suit pocket, now crumpled, seawater stained. She tore it in half, then again, sprinkling the pieces overboard. The scraps twirled before sinking, mingling with countless other secrets the Atlantic guarded. The cave's hymn faded as distance grew. In its place, Mira heard ordinary sounds. Diesel engines, gulls bickering above wake. Jonas's steady breathing. Sounds that remained mercifully fluid, incapable of turning to stone. She closed her eyes and promised herself that the next song she chased would be one that let listeners walk away unchanged. But she suspected that promise, like the shredded letter, would dissolve before morning. Some silences were just pauses between verses, and some scientists were born with ears tuned permanently to the dangerous keys.